So we'll get started. This is Unburdened by what has been number four open discussion on crypto AI, uh, pro crypto president, stablecoins, uh, things like that that you like to cover. Um, and there will be, I think, at least one or two speakers, and they, I think, have projects. So certainly want to hear what you're doing. So feel free to talk about your project and anything you'd like to comment on about what's going on in the world, especially as it relates to crypto. So before we begin, nothing we say or our speakers say is financial advice. Nothing is any forward-looking statements. And anytime you make a decision in crypto, you want to consult your tax and financial advisor before making any decision. If you could not join or having trouble, that I know we've talked our Telegram group to pull people in. So if anybody would like to post questions or comments in the Telegram group, we can comment on those. And I'm just typing that into Telegram now. So I'm Lance Parker, the founder of BankX. You can learn more about my background on my X at Lance Parker IO or my website, personal website, www.lanceparker.io. And then, of course, at BankX.io is our stablecoin platform and project with the same handle as BankX.io or www.bankx.io. We have our own system of dApps we're building, deploying a bridge, our own wallet with its own sort of unique blockchain. BankX is the first to pay you interest for minting a stablecoin. So you combine the native blockchain token and BankX to mint the XSD stablecoin, which is pegged to the price of 1 gram of silver, and you earn interest in the form of BankX for keeping that stablecoin in circulation. So we took inspiration from Frax, Olympus DAO, and the Hex protocol. You can also lock up BankX tokens and the token lockup rewards to get more BankX tokens. We have an NFT that pays you stablecoin at certain TVL milestones, and it boosts the rewards in the token lockup rewards. If you'd like to learn more about BankX, you can on our website or our socials, YouTube, of course, here at X. Also, for those BankX bandits, as Johnny calls them, a quick update. The upgrades to the system should be done this week. So we're redeploying to enhance the system, getting it ready for AI DeFi, which I'll describe here in a minute. And then the system should be fully operational. We're waiting for the Signum pricing oracle to launch before we deploy on Pulse Chain. Also, a project that I've been working on, which is wild, is effectively an AI clone of myself called Delta V, which will start posting on its own X account tomorrow. And then it's going to expand its capabilities of getting attention, building the community, onboarding members, answering questions about BankX. I have trained it, maybe with some inadvisable data sets, but a lot of it is all of the information that I have ever put online about BankX. So it's effectively an expert in BankX and be able to answer questions around that. So we'll see as that sort of grows up and, being a little baby, and sort of as we continue to train it and expand its capabilities. As I mentioned, AI DeFi, we are deploying and testing that. It is an automation application adjacent to BankX. So there's lots of things you can do in BankX, but if you don't want to take the time to learn it or monitor the system, AI DeFi does all of those executions for you automatically. And so we've got the code done for that. Now it's really just deploying and testing on the test net before we go to production. So I don't have a time on that. So those are the two major things that we've been doing as it relates to BankX. We've also begun development on our own wallet, and I am considering or speccing out an escrow type of application that we use XSD for real world assets and different, really any kind of trade you'd like to use the XSD stablecoin to make an escrow type of purchase. So what we like to do is I can start off the conversation with going through what has been going on in the world of politics, crypto and stablecoins, AI, um, and then hopefully that sparks ideas or thoughts or other things that maybe I would miss that you could also comment on. So uh, every day I keep track of what's going on. I take notes, and so when I go through this, this is effectively a summary of the things that I thought were interesting. I usually don't touch on everything, but there's been a lot of things going on. Of course, still the tariffs, where a lot of people don't like it because they say it could create inflation. Um, the other side of it is it's a bit, they argue that it's reciprocal, and there's other things that hurt the US as far as non monetary barriers. Uh, from a reciprocity perspective, example like India and South Korea have 2 to 4x our tariffs. Another example is like US cars going into Europe, I think have a 10 or 20% tariff, and then when European cars come, it's like 2.5%. So, while some people argue it's inflation, others say that it's more of equaling the playing field from a trade perspective. So it's been said like, oh, this is going to crash the market, but he did this in his first term, so I think it'll just be a bit of a volatility and disruption as he puts these back in place or intensifies them. Um, it seems also Trump is positioning to get the Fed to lower rates. There is about $9 trillion in debt due in 9 months or 8 months. Um, so would they print or refinance, or what are they going to really do there? I think they can get the rates lowered if CPI gets close to 2%, is what people are saying. The other things, there's been a lot of attacks on obviously Trump and Elon. There was the huge cyber attack against X. You have Doge and Trump really exposing a lot of the fraud. So they've closed the Department of Education. There's reports of John Podesta, the former Democrat campaign leader for Hillary. He got control or was given 356 billion with a B in new funds for NGO money that he sort of pushed out. Just yesterday, Elon Musk found that there was 2.1 illegal immigrants that have Social Security numbers and are getting benefits like welfare and Medicaid and are also registered to vote. So it's just wild, and that number spiked dramatically over the last couple of years, as he showed in a chart. There was an InfoWars reporter that was killed outside of his home on midnight who was exposing a lot of the Ukraine corruption. So that is something that's just unbelievable to me that reporters are getting killed. Trump obviously still working on a ceasefire. I've seen maybe 5 or 6 instances where Zelensky said that he was going to sign a minerals deal and start the path towards a ceasefire, and then he doesn't do it. I've been watching reports on the Panama Canal, and could that spark a war because of its strategic importance? It is effectively, I guess, being controlled by China, and they are charging our ships to go through. So it's got to, like, we built, it took 56,000 people to build this. The Panama Canal, about 5,600 people died. It was a project that took 10 years in the early 1900s of about 375 million, which is the equivalent of 8.6 billion in today's dollar. So there's that potential conflict that's going on, and then all this talk about Canada and would they be a 51st state? So we just kind of see what's going to happen. Those are sort of our hot topics geopolitically. The JFK documents came out. The news said a lot about, hey, there's nothing new here, but prior to that lease, there was a recording from Cliff Carter where he was in the audio talking about how LBJ ordered the assassination. So I watched a podcast with Roger Stone talk about it. He's been an expert on this and wrote books about it. where he hypothesized it was not only LBJ, but the CIA, the mob, Big Texas Oil, Secret Service, the FBI, and the Federal Reserve Bank, and even Israel. So, sort of this deep state consensus to take him out for a bunch of other reasons. Personally, he talked about LBJ was worried about the Bobby Baker scandal, which was they were using government funds and bribery uh, for votes. So that would have caused a lot of problems with him. There was a couple other reports of attempted assassinations of Trump during some speeches, and I don't know, what those reports are, how valid those are, but I would suspect he's still quite a target since they already tried to do that. Yesterday, I heard about Virginia Roberts, the Epstein victim. She was hit by a school bus that was going 110 kilometers an hour. So she's not expected to live past the week, is what they're saying. So uh, quite a number of things there. Another thing in the world that I posted on my personal X was just this wild discovery of the pyramids in Egypt, where not only are we wondering how they ever built this, but now they've discovered through some new technology where they're able to image underground, where there's these huge columns, about I think 8 of them, and they go about 600 meters down. They're interconnected at the bottom with two 8 millimeter cubes. So a lot of people are talking about, what is this, an energy system or whatever. So they're still looking at kind of what that is. But I thought that's sort of, at least, within the last 5 years, that's one of the biggest discoveries we've seen, and sheds even more questions on that. So that's sort of, what's been going on in the world that I thought was interesting from a technology and political perspective. For cryptos and stable coins, I keep asking, when's the meme coin craze done? Which really affects the Solana casino. Right now, they're saying it's about 36 billion in transfers or volume. The issue of what I've seen is been reported that 95% of the gas fees are by 1% of the wallets, which compared to 16% of that is on Ethereum. So, speaking of Ethereum, I'm watching YouTube videos of people talk about the manipulation of Ethereum and altcoins, being kept sort of artificially low. I kind of think crypto's kind of always manipulated. So, until the people with, the whales get enough of whatever they want before they want to keep before they want the price to go up. I studied a bit more on the strategic Bitcoin reserve and the strategic crypto reserve. So originally, when it first came out, I was like, "Oh, great, the government's buying it," but it's not as good as originally thought, I think, in the market. So the strategic Bitcoin reserve, they're just going to keep what they have, and they'll buy more as long as it doesn't affect any budget. So they call it budget neutral buys. Then there's this other strategic reserve called the strategic crypto reserve, where other assets that they already have, they can sell. So like if they have Cardano that they've seized or something like that, they can sell that, which I would think they'd probably rotate into Bitcoin or Ethereum. So it's not like this our government's out there making all these big buys, which was originally what I thought. I thought there was going to be some sort of allocation yearly or quarterly that they were going to do. So it's really more like, don't sell what we've seized, and we're going to sell off the non-blue chip sort of crypto, right? Um, One of the other things that I thought was very interesting, and we had a discussion in our Telegram about it, is at the time, this largest acquisition in crypto. So Stripe purchased a company called Bridge.xyz, which is a B2B stablecoins payment system, and they purchased it for 1.1 billion. So I like to look at those sort of, a company just sort of 1 or 2 years old as being purchased for that amount of money can really signal where things are going, and it emphasizes the importance of stable coins and one of their primary use cases of cross-border payments and other things that they are doing. I just saw today that Circle is going to IPO next quarter, or this quarter, I should say, Q2. So very interesting things going on with stablecoins there. From an AI perspective, since we last spoke, Grok 3, I've been testing that out a bit, which is an amazing technological feat that he was able to build that in 15 days with 100,000 H100s, and then added another 100,000. I do really like Grok 3. Manus was, I think, launched, or they've been around or announced that capabilities where we were seeing AI control 50 browsers and clicking buttons, and kind of pretty wild what you can do there with deploying websites and downloading files in chat. So AI is moving so fast, it's hard to keep up. I'm studying that pretty intensely too. Google Gemini 2.5 Pro came out, but I haven't had a chance to look at that. And then just today, I heard OpenAI closed a 40 billion with a B round at a post-money valuation of 300 billion. So those were the main things that caught my eye since we had our last Unburdened by what it's been. And just generally, I'm still looking at an outlook for this year where, this is kind of the beginning. We should get a bull market at some point, or maybe early next year. I'm not sure. AI is going to obviously, I think, still have the narrative and attention. Maybe later in the year, real world assets is what I'm thinking too. So that in general is some of the things and thoughts since we had the last one. And I'll open up to who would like to make any comments. You could, if you have a project, certainly talk about that, and any comments on what's going on, and agree, disagree. If you have stable coins, even though BankX has their stable coin, certainly like to hear what you're doing. I think there's plenty of room for everyone, no matter what your project is. So yeah, Kartik, go ahead. You just need to unmute. You're already a speaker.
Awesome. Thank you, Lance. And I love your summaries. This is the second time that we've been invited onto the show, and we're super grateful to get
Oh,
the
thank you, sir.
attention. But yeah, like I think your insights are super sharp. Just a couple of things in terms of what you've said. So I really like the way the world is moving towards reacting to what America and some of the other major countries that have been pioneering stablecoin regulation have been doing. So MiCA is kind of super defensive in Europe. America, I think, is going to be super proactive and supportive, having seen such a dramatic swing from Democrats trying to oppress crypto to Republicans apparently embracing it. And we think the world is kind of bifurcating, right? You have a bunch of cryptos that are super degen on one side, and I put like Athena into that, even though they're kind of CeFi, DeFi, and partly institutional, and generating huge yield, double digits most of the time. And then you have the other end of the spectrum where it's super safe, treasury backed, fully redeemable, and it feels like it has a little bit more of an institutional quality to it. Um, in between, you have this plethora of semi-degen tokens, which may or may not be, pristine asset backed like yourselves with Silver, may or may not be based on major assets like Ethereum. You've got like others like Sky, which have mixed assets, and Synthetics SUSD, who have been going through a terrible time at the moment with Bitcoin related collateral issues. But it feels like these two, the two extremities are going to squeeze the middle. And I'm super interested to see how that shakes out. I think anyone with pristine assets are much, much more likely to survive because I'm not going to say it's a niche, certainly not. There'll be huge populations that are looking for assets that they can kind of touch, feel, and move into the digital world. But others that are taking a much more esoteric approach based off random cryptos are going to have a harder time because when you're onboarding the masses, it's not a situation in which you can really kind of mass educate them, red pill them, and then bring them into your product. Like there's any number of pathways their kind of trajectory through the crypto landscape is going to take. And in all likelihood, unfortunately, it's going to be driven by the largest, the loudest, the guys with the biggest marketing budgets to kind of, whitewash, brainwash, whatever, like educate
Mm-hmm.
people in their way. So we're trying to track a middle ground. We are delighted to say we'll definitely have a synthetic stablecoin launch soon. We already have an Ethereum asset, a Solana asset, which is pioneering DemSol, which can be bridged across any chain rather than just kind of isolated to the Solana ecosystem. And the final part of the puzzle for us will be DemUSD. So we've recently struck deals with Usual and M0. M0 is a team that many may not know, but they raised like something like $60 million. They spun out from MakerDAO, and this is going to be an over-collateralized treasury stablecoin. But we'd like to
Hmm.
accept a mix of interesting assets to try and deliver that degen yield, but at the same time have pristine asset backing that people could actually decompose back into dollars or whatever the kind of pristine asset collateral is, and withdraw at the end of the day should the apocalypse come or they feel any kind of reason to pull their assets out from there. But I'd love to hear your thoughts and the panel's thoughts on, how this kind of evolution of the market could continue and which side you see winning or progressing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Kartik, because you clearly have Trump coming in, and he looks like he's obviously supporting USD-backed stablecoins. Yeah, but uh, what does that do when he's no longer in office, right? So um, I think there's the potential of that sort of being sucked into a CBDC-like stablecoin. So then there's all the others, right? Of stable coins, which I think the ones that will win are the ones that would, generate interest for either the holder or I think better than the issuer, right? So, like Athena, like to me, if I'm going to hold one and it's just in my wallet, I want to stake it to have some return and then not even deal with the bank. So I have heard, Kartik, that there is stablecoin legislation out there being proposed where I think part of it is saying that, and it's probably being influenced by the banking system, where if you have a stable coin, you can't offer yield or something. I don't know the specific details, but I could see them, how is the bank going to compete with something where you don't need them? And by some mechanism, whether, like with BankX, if you mint it, you're getting more of the BankX tokens, or like Athena, I believe you stake it. I haven't used Athena, but I think the USD sort of stable coins would win, just because of the government use and sort of forcing trade and kind of all those things. And then there's the ones for people who don't want to sort of be in that world, but that are sort of yield generating sort of stable coins. So I think those would probably be the two categories. And just to clarify, so BankX is not silverback. We peg to the price of 1 gram of silver, but we are crypto backed. So to maintain this decentralization, so we took a point of being different in the market of as an inflationary hedge and that sort of thing. So I don't know if anybody else has comments or have a different viewpoint from what Kartik had to offer there, but feel free to hop on or um, comment on that. So Kartik, where are you? Are you in? You sound like you're in Europe or the UK. I know we talked about it and you gave a little. I'm just trying to recall.
No,
Um,
no problem at all.
yeah,
So I grew up in the UK, but I migrated over
that's
to Australia to try and
that's right.
align with Asian time zones. It felt like, Europe was biblical at that point, like war, pestilence, famine, Brexit, especially Brexit. That was the worst.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Um, that and the weather, which was constantly grating. But I'm super grateful. Like I loved my upbringing in the UK, had strong British principles, love the fact that it was like, a mixed environment, lots of immigration, learning from other cultures, hopping over to the US and Europe very easily. But things along the way have kind of deteriorated and it doesn't feel like a forward-facing economy anymore. So I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to align with Asia. Back then, it was very clear that Hong Kong was becoming a hub of crypto. Singapore already had become. Interesting regulation was coming out to support the institutions onboarding. And it just felt much more progressive, like the old world was trapped a little bit, not necessarily just in infighting, or politics, but more along the lines of trying to support outdated industries. And yeah, there's a terrible amount of kind of historical debt to pay, whereas Asia was unburdened. And you can see that in culture. Like when I grew up, I was writing on a slate and a piece of chalk. I probably dated myself now horribly, but you see the kids of today, which kind of skip to iPads regardless of which country they live in. There's like ultra cheap Android devices even in the third world. Um, and it's just amazing, like their grasp of technical subjects, concepts, sciences is so enormously progressive. And so, yeah, I appreciated that forward-looking nature above all else, and that's why I moved to Australia. Plus, of course, the suntan beach. Um, but yeah, I think the US is now turning back into a hotspot. So
Mhm.
it's nice that I have some proximity to California at the very least. New York is still 20 plus hours away. And it's fascinating to see how the world is evolving from, a little kind of Western village over here in Sydney.
Hmm. Yeah, I love Australia. I think Johnny's been there or still there. So, um, what are your thoughts on Athena? Last I checked, they had like 6 billion um, TVL, but the way they generate a bit of centralization and management on their side to be able to um, generate those yields, and I think it mostly takes advantage of funding rates between sort of spot and futures, if I'm remembering that correctly. I haven't used it or anything, but that one seems to be the hot one so far. Hmm.
No, you're absolutely
Awesome.
right. That's exactly how it's generated. So it's kind of the funding basis trade difference between the forward rates on Ethereum and the yield-bearing Ethereum-based token that they take in. So, for example, you could do it like Lido, staked ETH, or ETHFI, or whatever you like. Um,
Hmm.
I guess there were two criticisms that came out when it was originally launched. However, the hype and the interest in it were enormous at being able
Hmm.
to, deliver such yields. Number one was the centralization, as you rightly pointed out. And number two was the fact that funding rates are variable. So you have most of the time when it's wildly negative and it should kind of average out in the 20 to 30% range, which is mind blowing for
Right.
anything kind of dollar pegged.
Hmm.
But it can also go negative. So you can have 40% down to 14, down to 4, down to -4 on any given day of the week without any kind of predictability or kind of foresight, which meant that they were forced to have an insurance fund or some kind of disengagement to be able to cover people's losses through the cycle. And I think that is its one kind of Achilles heel, that it's based on centralization and it can never break away from the centralization of that insurance fund to be able to offset the negative rates scenario. So one of the reasons why we developed DemUSD was exactly to solve that. So you can onboard to DemUSD with any yield-bearing stablecoin in theory, and of course we'd kind of start with Athena, usual M0, and we would monitor the Binance Oracle, the Bybit Oracle, centralized rates to ensure that if the funding rates got negative before Athena's apparent yield turned negative or collapsed towards zero, we swap out of it. It's a deeply liquid
Ah,
market anyway, plenty of assets out there. Why do you need to be holding that at 2 a.m. and then suddenly, wake up to realize you've got a huge loss on your life savings? So it's little things like this that we think cannot necessarily be built by the centralized authority or the issuer because it's not in their best interest to do so and swap into collateral that's not their own. Just make no
ah,
sense, and it will probably lead you down the dark road that unfortunately MakerDAO took by onboarding a huge amount of USDC and then worrying about it retrospectively.
right.
It's only something that someone else can do outside. So yeah, I think all of these things are solvable, and we have huge respect for the team and anyone building in the stablecoin space. It's going to be a tremendous market and plenty to go for.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think it's like USDC talked about their IPO where like they're 60 billion or so, and just with USD, there's like 2.7 trillion. So there's a lot of room to digitize the dollar there, is what they're saying. So with DemUSD, so you actively manage the collateral underlying your stablecoin. So like you could be in Athena, and then if the rates are starting to nosedive, you would transfer into some other asset that would back it, maybe another stablecoin or something like that. Is that how that
That's
works? It's
exactly
pretty
right.
interesting.
Yeah, so it's like kind of tokenizing a curve pool. When you turn up and you give liquidity to Curve, for example, so you
Hmm.
can put in a bit of, say, let's try crypto. You put in wrap Bitcoin, you put in ETH, you put in DAI or Tether or whatever you like. But when you withdraw from the pool, you may not get the same assets. Like it's equivalent, and you expect there to be some kind of movement between the assets, and you can kind of pay a premium or take a penalty if you do want to withdraw in one asset. So we would hold, say, 50% of the collateral in treasury-backed pristine assets that are absolutely, redeemable for dollars, and the other 50% will be rotated based on rules, not based on our discretion. I think that would be enormously dangerous from a regulatory standpoint, also from a community standpoint, that some random guy is just running it like a hedge fund. It cannot
Hmm.
be like that.
Yeah.
We'll have some clear parameters. So, for example, if Athena fell below 7%, would you really want to hold it? Like that's enormous smart contract risk, huge volatility, and only marginal returns above and beyond treasuries. You might as well just go back to a 3.5 to 4% yielding treasury-based token, or anything else. Like you can have DAI, you can have BankX tokens, like whatever you like. And so we
Hmm.
would have a very kind of narrow bandwidth of tokens that have sufficient liquidity that we're not going to end up panic selling, or if there's a depeg that's triggered, ends up dumping. And these things become recursive, right? When the machines start to dump, then everyone starts to dump and everyone panics, and the depeg is kind of self-fulfilling. So into markets where we think our collateral base can withstand movement, and also ones that are extremely unlikely to depeg in the first place, with very clear mechanisms to preserve their peg stability. So that was the initial idea. And then, of course, in version 2, it gets even more juicy. What if you take each of those assets that you're already managing, and then you put them into Aave or something equivalent, Morpho, generate
Hmm.
even more yield? You would have a natural advantage above and beyond any other individual stablecoin. You deal with fragmentation. You could really harmonize the concept that my dollar is your dollar, rather than
Hmm.
having my dollar is absolutely not comparable to your dollar in risk profile, volatility, or utility. Um, and so it becomes something that's a little bit more palatable for the masses. Not necessarily
Yeah.
getting the highest level of yield, but definitely safer.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's where it's going, Kartik. Anyway, like there's these like USDT, USDC. They have these enormous uh, revenue coming off of them taking your capital and deploying it, and then no one says anything. So I think things like what you're doing, Athena, and just the whole concept of the person that owns the asset should get the yield, or at least most of it. Maybe there is like a management kind of thing. I don't know how you're structured, but to me, I think those are going to be sort of the two clear winners in the stablecoin market as more people start to, you know, deploy stablecoins. Like one of the things that Bridge did do or is doing is they allow companies to issue their own stablecoin that then provides yield, because I think they're putting them in T-bills and things like that. So I think they're thinking along the same lines too. So I think you and I are looking at stable coins the same way. So yeah, absolutely. Uh, awesome. So who is anybody else? Like I think Walleye, do you want to make any comments or um, talk about your
Yeah, I mean,
project or anything? Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, we're we're not really super involved with or involved at all with the staking or any kind of APY metrics.
Hmm.
Our mission is just pretty much to give self custody back to traders for interchain trading through our uh, L3 solutions, which are state channels, and so it's peer to peer based. Um, so we kind of stay out of a lot of this stuff, partially because of unknown regulatory stuff still.
Hmm.
um, and I mean, we were talking about the U.S. kind of becoming a hotspot again. And I remember when we were starting our foundation and getting the ball rolling and looking at all these different places, and the U.S. was not the place to go to. And that was
Hmm.
just a short time ago, a year and a half ago or so, or maybe a little bit more than
Hmm.
that. And so there's still I know a lot of other foundations too are based where we're out of for the same reasons. and we still haven't seen any reason to move to the U.S. Yet. Um, so we'll see how things progress, and there's a lot of positive news of what could happen, but until it actually does, where I think the majority of crypto is still on its toes, waiting to see where these things lead. So yeah, we will see.
Yeah,
But
hopefully they put down some good laws here that while he's in there, because it does, as you said, turn on a dime. Like just 6 months ago, it was like
yeah.
worry. Yeah. So,
And then what happens too, like you were saying, okay, so all these great things were done while Trump was in office, if they do occur. What happens when he gets out of office? What changes? And now you've just locked your company or your project into the U.S., and you might be, all of a sudden up for, these different regulation grabs or whatever else happens. So, it's still very, even if we had a great time, over the next, 3.5 years or so, 4 years. Um, there's always that chance that something can turn on you, and you would put yourself in a different position, worse off than you would have been just staying where you're at. So,
right,
you
a
know,
political rug pull, basically.
yeah, it would be too. It would
So,
be for many projects that would take that leap and actually go for it, especially since he was saying, at least from what I heard or understood, is that there were going to be um, different taxations for American based crypto projects and stuff like that, or no capital gains. But until any of that stuff actually does start happening and is protected by law, that would be hard to change. You know. Um, I just don't see it. I'm hopeful being, US, but we'll see.
hmm yeah, hopefully it works out. They can codify here some rules that are very pro crypto, you know,
Yeah,
before
but
he's
but it
out.
always
Yeah.
it always comes back to how do you protect yourself the most, regardless of the situation, and that remains to be decentralized and to remain in the decentralized kind of category by how you operate, how you make decisions, everything like that. So I mean, if you stay in those parameters, you will be protected regardless, in some sense, because of the existing regulations or legal jargon that we've already seen. Um,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so I believe you were still you're close to launching, or you have launched uh,
Well,
your project. Are
I
you
mean,
sure you're working on some things?
yeah, I mean,
From what I remember.
we've been working pretty tough. We're pretty close to launching. So the next phase of what we're going to do would be an open beta for everybody to use the product.
Okay.
Currently, we have 22 testers that are in our alpha group that they're the ones that are testing each and every integration that we do, every update that we do. Whether that be from channel backup. So a lot of our how we operate is peer-to-peer based, personal Lightning nodes, personal Lithium nodes, which is our solution to the Lightning network for the rest of crypto. That's at least smart contract based, like all EVMs or
hmm
Solana or anything like that. Um, and have the ability for people to have full control over their channels, over their nodes, over everything that they do, and have no reliance on the team or no reliance on any kind of third party. That's always been the mission, to give back traders, the or anybody who wants to transact, that ability to move from just say Bitcoin to a stable coin on Ethereum or Solana, from within their own wallet, and not have to multi-hop all different wallets. Um, so
hmm
that being the main mission, there's a lot of hurdles that you need to figure out, and so we've been doing that in order to stay trustless. So that channel backups will be the next one, since everything is based on a browser, right? You don't have to download any kind of client for this, or download anything onto your client. Um, there's a lot of stuff that we need to figure out before we get there, and we're pretty much getting close. I mean, the next big thing that we're going to release to our guys is the channel backups, and then also the which you can enter a seed phrase from uh, you can enter a seed phrase from a different browser, um, and you would be able to have all your channels come back up again in a decentralized cloud-based way. So
Cool. Yeah, let us.
And then our order book will be next, and then after the order book, where you can set limit and do market orders or whatever you want, that will be next, and then we're pretty much after that's refined, we're ready for open beta for the rest of crypto to test out and just use test funds and trade and see how
Mhm.
it all operates and see what we're actually doing.
Cool. Yeah, I'd like to see it when let me know when you're open beta. I'd like to
Yeah.
check it out and
Well,
try it. Yeah.
well, you can always, if you ever wanted to jump in, I can get you into alpha testing if you just wanted to see where we're at now.
Yeah, absolutely. You
Cool.
just send me what I need to like to check it out.
Of course.
Awesome. Yeah. Go ahead, Kartik. I sorry, I thought I added you back as a speaker, Kartik, if you needed.
Yeah, no worries.
Mhm.
So just to comment on the Solana point, I think it's super interesting, but market pragmatism and just looking at the landscape of the tokens in Solana just got us super bullish. So there's only, I think, two, maybe three protocols that have crossed a couple of $1 billion in market cap. Like it's
Mhm.
such a wide open space. If you look at the structure of the stablecoin market, $12.7 billion when I checked it a couple of days ago. And USDT and USDC accounts for all of that, like all of it. Everything else is rounding error, right?
Mm.
On the list of like 50 different stablecoins, there is no native Solana stablecoins that have really progressed to any level of dominance. So it's such an enormously native space. I would think, maybe the risk reward is well in your favor. And we've even toyed with the idea of having uh, potentially listing our governance token into Solana, because why not? Like it's a much, much less crowded space for DeFi, but you still
Mhm.
have some very, very credible actors. And for us personally, I mean, we have a good reason to do so because we have the Dem Sol product, and we can say we're kind of not necessarily shifting allegiance, but playing to the strength of that product and demonstrating our belief. So I don't know, Johnny. Sorry, Lance. I'd probably go for it. I think it would
Yeah.
be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we're seriously thinking about it. It wouldn't, we need to convert everything into Rust. So it's a bit of a development effort with all the other things we've got going on. So when I saw the meme coin craze, I was like, I don't know. This really isn't sustainable. But you know, every chain needs a stable coin. It's just yeah. Are you going to do it, Kartik? Are you thinking of you mentioned just putting your governance token. Are you going to do it, or maybe it's too difficult the way your protocol set up to go there?
Yeah, I guess that the problem is the pristine collateral that we're going after lives on Ethereum. So
Yeah.
it's theoretically possible because a lot of these guys are probably going to launch into Solana as well at some point. So we can kind of, stand on the shoulders of other giants. But it doesn't necessarily differentiate us from anyone else. Like it's just the deployment into Solana. We may do that kind of retrospectively at
Mhm.
some point in the future, but it's not kind of part of the core strategy, I think, at this stage for us.
Yeah. Yeah. We're it's definitely high on the list. We just are getting through some other projects here too. But yeah, it's definitely on my radar for BankX. So well, great. If that is all the comments we have or any questions, I think we'll wrap up. And again, thanks Johnny for scheduling this up and for the speakers, Walleye, Kartik, and Deford. I appreciate you coming on, and we'll let you know when we're going to have Unburdened number 5. But I appreciate everyone coming on. Thank you very much.